Have you ever stopped to think about the law as, like, an operating system for society? It's this huge, incredibly complex code that's always running in the background. It guides how we deal with each other, what we can do, what we can't do, and what happens when things go sideways. The funny thing is, most of us have never actually read the source code, but we live by its rules every single day.
So let's just dive right into that question, because let's be real, the answer for pretty much all of us is a definite yes. I mean, from buying your morning coffee to the absolute biggest moments of your life, there's this invisible instruction set that's governing your every move. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a few of its most fundamental, most important rules.
All right, so first things first, where does this all even begin? How does some idea just become a rule that every single one of us has to follow? Well, it's not random. It's not arbitrary. Our system actually has a mandatory process, and it's specifically designed to make sure things are fair and that people are aware before any new code gets added to our social operating system.
Okay, look really closely at this, because step one is everything: publication. This is not just a polite suggestion. It is a non-negotiable part of due process. The Supreme Court has been unbelievably clear about this. You can't be expected to follow a rule that you had no possible way of knowing about. So the law has to be published, in full, for everyone to see. And only after that publication is totally done does that 15-day countdown even start. Then, on day 16, bam! That new piece of code is officially live in our society's operating system.
And that whole idea of publication, it leads us directly into our first major rule. Because once a law is officially live, the system has a very stark, very unforgiving expectation about your responsibility to know it.
This right here is one of the oldest, most fundamental principles in all of law. Ignorantia legis neminem excusat. Now, it sounds harsh, I know. But just think about the alternative for a second. What if you could get out of a speeding ticket or a tax problem just by saying, "Oops, sorry, I didn't know that was the rule"? The whole system would completely fall apart. It would be impossible to enforce any law at all. So the law makes a kind of bargain. We will publish the rules for everyone to see, but in return, you are presumed to know them. No excuses, period.
But here's where the system gets a little more nuanced. It makes a really sharp distinction between not knowing a rule and being mistaken about a fact. This slide shows it perfectly. Thinking a one-way street is two-way? That's ignorance of the law. That's on you. But accidentally paying the wrong person because you honestly thought you owed them money, that's a mistake of fact. The law gets that honest mistakes about facts can happen, and it usually gives you a way to fix it, like, getting your money back.
Okay, let's talk about another core feature of this legal operating system. And this one is huge for making sure things are fair. It's all about which direction the law is allowed to look. And the answer is forward.
Lex prospicit, non respisit. The law looks forward, not backward. What that means is you can't be punished today for something you did yesterday when that thing was perfectly legal. Just imagine if a new law tomorrow made drinking coffee illegal, and then the government could arrest everyone who had a cup this morning. Society would be totally chaotic, right? Completely unpredictable. This principle makes sure that we can live our lives based on the rules we know today without having to worry that the rules will change tomorrow and retroactively make us criminals.
Now, like any good rule, this one has a few exceptions. A law can look backward, but only in very, very specific cases, like if it's just changing a court procedure or fixing a little technical error in an old law. But the most important exception, the one that really matters to people, is that last one. If a new law comes out that reduces the penalty for a crime, that new, lighter penalty can be applied to someone who is already convicted under the old, harsher law. It's the legal system's way of saying, hey, if we as a society decide a punishment was too severe, that benefit should extend to people who are already affected.
All right, let's shift gears. We're going to move from these big system-wide rules to something deeply, deeply personal: marriage. Because when you say "I do," you're not just making a promise to someone. You are entering a special kind of contract that is heavily, heavily regulated by the state's operating system. And understanding the legal status of that contract is absolutely critical.
Okay, this is a distinction that trips up so many people, so let's break it down. A void marriage is a legal nothing. From the very beginning, it's as if it never even happened. A bigamous marriage, for instance, was never legally real. A voidable marriage, though, is different. It's valid, it is real, it exists, and it has all the legal effects of a marriage until someone goes to court and gets it annulled because of some defect, like if consent was forced. But until that court says so, you are, for all legal intents and purposes, married.
And this is where that distinction becomes absolutely life-altering. The Supreme Court in this case, Mercado versus Tan, made it crystal clear. You cannot just decide on your own that your first marriage was void and then go off and marry someone else. You must go to court and get a final judgment that says it's null. If you don't do that, the law presumes your first marriage still exists. And if you marry again, you've just committed the crime of bigamy. It's a really powerful reminder that you just can't ignore the operating system's rules.
All right, let's tackle a more sophisticated concept now. We generally think that if someone's actions cause us harm or some kind of loss, we should be able to sue them. But the law, well, the law has a much more nuanced view on this.
Damnum obsque injuria. It translates to damage without legal injury. And the core idea is this: you can suffer a very real loss, real damage, but if it was caused by someone who is just legitimately exercising their own legal rights, then you don't have a legal comeback. The law simply doesn't offer a remedy for that kind of loss. Let's see how this actually plays out in the real world.
So in this case, a teacher quit her job because she felt pressured by her colleagues. They were threatening to resign to protest her being kept on. Now, did she suffer damage? Oh, absolutely. She lost her job. But were the other teachers doing anything illegal? Nope. They were exercising their right to free speech and to protest. Since they were acting within their rights, the harm she suffered was damnum absque injuria. Damage, yes, but without a legal injury.
But now contrast that with this other case. Here, an employer filed six baseless criminal complaints against a former employee even after the police had already cleared him. This caused the guy massive humiliation and made it impossible for him to find a new job. So what's the difference? Well, here the employer wasn't just exercising a right, they were abusing a right. The key ingredients were malice and bad faith. This wasn't damage without injury, this was a clear abuse of rights, and you can bet it was actionable in court. So we've seen how this whole legal operating system works, from how it's created to its core principles. But this code, it's not static. It's not carved in stone. It's actually a living, breathing document that is constantly being updated.
And the main way these updates happen is through a principle called stare decisis, which basically means let the decision stand. What Article 8 of the Civil Code says is that court decisions that interpret the law actually become part of the legal system itself. You can think of these decisions as official software patches. They're updates to the operating system.
And just like with your phone, you only want official updates from the developer, right? Well, our legal system has a similar rule. It's not just any court decision that can change the law. It's only decisions from the highest court, the Supreme Court, that establish binding doctrine. They're the ones who get to release the definitive updates to our country's legal code.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. We've seen how these invisible rules get made and how they evolve. The law isn't just a bunch of dusty old books. It's a dynamic, always changing system. And it just makes you wonder, with society and technology changing faster than ever before, what's the next big patch our legal system is going to need?